Good morning, Rise and Freedom. I'm Austin Peterson. You're watching and listening to the Wake Up America show at wakeupamericashow.com. It's a beautiful Monday morning here in Jefferson City, Missouri. I hope it's lovely where you are. I had a great weekend. As you can see, I got a little sun on my face after spending an awesome weekend with the Cantina crew. This was our first annual Wake Up America show get-together. I say first annual, which implies there's going to be a second annual. Yes, I'm hoping that the Wake Up America show will still be around a year from now. How about you? I think that you do, especially if you're tuning in this early in the morning to the show and not just trickling in as somebody who's like, what's this show all about in the morning? Well, it's coming up on the 1-year anniversary of the Wake Up America show live stream. Yes, it's almost been an entire year since I started this podcast on my own as its own little self-contained business, and the community that has banded together to support this show decided to gather this weekend in the Ozarks, Missouri. We went to Huzzah River down in, what was the name of the town? Steelville. It's the float capital of Missouri. And boy, there were a lot of people floating in the float capital of Missouri this weekend. It was more like bumper boats to a certain extent, but at least there was some water out there because of all the rain we've been getting. Thankfully, there was no rain while we were out there on the river. Had an absolutely beautiful time and got to make some, well, I guess we're already friends, even though we're all sort of living so far away. Friends of the Wake Up America show, finally got to meet him in person. Quest and his lovely family, as well as Matt Unruh, his wife Robin, and so many other people who decided to come out this weekend. I absolutely loved it. Getting to meet Joni Rankin in person, sit down and have a drink with her and chat a little bit about our musical theater past and talk about why we believe in liberty. I mean, these are the times that really make life worthwhile. And of course, my beautiful wife Stephanie was with us, and we were super impressed with the quality of the Super 8 motel. Now get this, I was shocked. Stephanie was really impressed with the popcorn machine in the lounge, but I was really impressed with the fact that apparently there was a jacuzzi in Quest Fanning's suite at the Super 8. Have you ever heard of a Super 8 motel that had a jacuzzi in it? I have no idea. I've never heard of that before, but apparently there was. Yeah. Anyway, we've got a great show for you today, and it's all thanks to those friends who got together this weekend. We appreciate you very much. Where was Jamie Marie Pope? She was supposed to be here this weekend. Anyways, we hope to see her next year. Of course, we were missing Tolly Owens and so many of our other friends who were there in spirit, I am sure. So make sure you click like and subscribe to the channel that you're watching us on this morning. If you like the content, we've got a lot of great stuff for you today. And I don't think I'm going to be able to get through it all. But first of all the presidential candidates for the Republican Party gathered at the Iowa State Fair over the weekend. And we've got some interesting clips and even a rap song that Vivek Ramaswamy busted out in front of the crowd. It was interesting watching an Indian man break out into an Eminem song in front of a crowd of white people at the Iowa State Fair. Needless to say, they didn't quite go as wild as they do in the movie 8 Mile when Eminem is up in front of the crowd of mostly black people in the audience and he's breaking down his back to reality. Oop, there goes gravity. It's a little awkward. I'll play it for you here in just a second. But then I've also got a really good interaction with a self-described pansexual. No, not Barack Obama. We'll get to that in a second. A self-described pansexual who approached Vivek Ramaswamy to ask him his thoughts on the LGBTQ plus community. And I think his answer, his turnaround on that was brilliant. I've got that clip. I'll play it for you here in just a couple minutes. So you got to stick around. And then I've also got another clip. This is kind of out of the blue, but you're going to hear a lot of things today that are going to kind of turn on your head what you would think I would say about this. Typically, Austin likes to throw out the red meat to the audience. Every person who's a talk show host has to give their audience a little bit of what they want to hear, or else, because if you tell people the truth, if you don't make them laugh, they'll kill you. But today I'm going to play a couple of clips and I'm going to take the opposite. Today I'm going to agree with AOC, and I'm going to disagree with the new anthem of White Boy Summer, Men North of Richmond. I know. I listened to the video the first time I heard it, and I agreed with it viscerally. But then what's wrong with me is my stupid brain. It always gets in the way of my success. If I fail, it's because it's that stupid big brain of mine. Stupid big brain. Maybe I really am an idiot, to be honest. I think I have been for a long time. But when I listened to the lyrics of Men North of Richmond, then I started thinking about it. And when I started thinking about it, I realized that somebody who was disagreeing with the point of the song actually makes a few good points. You know what my problem is that I listen to the people who disagree with me, and sometimes I agree with them and think that I was wrong. And this is a big mistake. You shouldn't do that. Well, at least not if you want to be successful in politics. You're supposed to just agree with everybody in your tribe. And maybe I'll do some of that today. So at 7:35 today, Obama's weird gay stuff. Okay. I've always avoided the Michelle Obama is transgender stuff because it reminds me a little bit of, like, remember the old conspiracy theory about that Donald Trump was pushing about the Obama birth certificate and all that kind of stuff, and everybody's all like, oh, it's, he like got a bunch of like MAGA boomers fired up about it, and then one of them got murdered by the FBI last week. Barack Obama told an ex, quote, "I make love to men daily, but in the imagination." So that's a little bit, and this is a letter that he wrote to an ex. So that's a little bit more confirmed than the birth certificate stuff or the Obama's packing heat under her dress stuff. So we're going to go there today with Jon Miltimore, of all people. And then I'll give him a more serious topic when we talk to him about why the United States lost our AAA credit rating. So it's going to be a great conversation with the man, Jon Miltimore. Oh, hey, look at that. Quest Fanning, thanks very much for the super chat. We appreciate you, sir. As you all know, I had to buy a new phone because, yeah, the big story of the weekend was, for me at least, was the lost my phone at the bottom of the river. Thankfully, I did have insurance, but there was that $250 deductible, which we had to pay. So thanks for the $5, Quest Fanning. Appreciate that very much. That will help me to replace that phone. Camellia Peterson says, who was also with us on the trip this weekend, and we had a good time with Camellia. She said, I didn't know the Michelle Obama trans thing was a thing until an older lady was telling me this last week. Yeah. The Michelle Obama's trans, the Kenyan birth certificate stuff, that's kind of like that's the MAGA boomer territory, where they get really hung up on those kinds of conspiracy theories because it's funny, right? And it's fun. We're all just laughing. It's like, I've seen the memes of Michelle Obama where it looks like there's like a little wing wang there underneath the dress, and it is entertaining, right? But I don't spend 6 months trying to prove that Obama was born in Kenya or something like that because I'm not a grifter, right? So you could be, right? It'd be better to be a grifter. You make more money, but I appreciate that. Camellia says, oh, good. I was hoping you have insurance. Yeah, I had insurance on the phone. And they're sending me a new one. So $250 deductible. Got that one. Yeah, it sucks. Doug H. Yes. Doug, just so you know, everybody was wondering if you were with us on the trip, but I was like, no, it's not. That's a different Doug. You're Doug or Doug H. Diug, whatever the hell that is. Maria Krabs says, is someone with the name Obama going to run? I mean, my husband is gay, probably sells big in an election. Very funny. Studio 314 says he's going to have to hear the explanation why Oliver Anthony's song is a wrong thing. This turns out to be interesting. It's not that it's a wrong thing. I definitely appreciate the song itself. I think it's a beautiful song, and I identify with it on a visceral level, but on an intellectual level, I think that there's more to be desired. Thank you to Robbie Therabin for $50 in the AP Phone Fund. I appreciate that. Money is kind of tight. So that is definitely much appreciated. Thank you, Robbie, very much. It was great to see you as well on the float trip. Robbie is a trooper, man. This guy is, well, he's just always kind of limping a little bit, but he got his butt in a canoe and he went down the river with us. And I have to say, huzzah to Robbie. Huzzah, Robbie. Robbie's a good man. And thank you for that donation, Robbie. We appreciate that very much. Remy from Reason Magazine has a new video out, which is awesome. Try that in a large town, a Jason Aldean parody. There's going to be a lot of really good music and music videos today. We're going to talk about that at 7:51. At 8 o'clock today, I'm going to start the beginning of, here's another thing that you all aren't going to want to hear. This is going to be the opposite of red meat. This is going to be rancid, stinking, rotting meat for you statists. Authoritarian big government meat for you today. Here it is. Bring on the counter-revolution. An article by Christopher Rufo had me doing a deep dive this weekend before I lost my phone. And then yesterday, I just couldn't stop reading this article and going over it. And I have to recommend that every single libertarian who's serious about making change in politics these days, or conservatives as well, because I think this article was written with conservatives in mind, but I think a lot of libertarians could stand to learn for it and start begin a new ideological journey. This article is called "Bring on the Counter Revolution" by Christopher Rufo. I'm going to drop it for you in the chat so that you guys can get a copy of it here, because I have to monitor the chat on my computer because I don't have my phone over there. Kermode Bear says that Austin thinking, quote, listening to people who disagree with you, gasp, how dare you? Get back in line right now and tell people what they want to hear. Yes, exactly. Very funny. Glad to see you here, Kermode Bear, as well as Blue Trike and Gwolkus0422. Appreciate y'all tuning into the Wake Up America show this morning. Make sure that you click that like button if you're tuning in right now. You know we need those likes to help spread the message of economic freedom and personal liberty, which I absolutely still believe in, but every once in a while I like to listen to the other side. And this article, Bring on the Counter Revolution, says conservatives need a national agenda that reclaims American institutions from the left. A blueprint exists from a surprising source in this article, which is terrific, in the City Journal magazine. I dropped the link for you all there. Highly recommend that you read it after the show and digest it. Got me thinking about some of the positive aspects of Richard Nixon. Now, if I was still a member of the Libertarian Party and I'd said anything nice about Richard Nixon, which I did yesterday on Twitter and some of the Libertarian Party accounts that were attacking me over it. Oh, what about the war on drugs? What about wage and price controls? Yeah. There's a lot of things to criticize Richard Nixon for. There's a lot of things you can criticize Ron Paul for. There's a lot of things you can criticize Murray Rothbard for. There are a lot of things that you can criticize all of the icons and heroes of Libertarian for, but things that they were absolutely wrong about. There are things that Ron Paul has been wrong about. There are things that Murray Rothbard has been wrong about. There are things that Judge Napolitano has been wrong about. There are things that all of our heroes and our icons have been wrong about, and it's a mixed bag, so what Ayn Rand, for example, has been wrong about things, right? So what do? Well, we cherry pick. We pick and we choose, and we say we like these things. We just happen to agree more with Ron Paul or Judge Napolitano or Murray Rothbard or Ayn Rand than we do with someone like Karl Marx or John Maynard Keynes. But that isn't to say that John Maynard Keynes hasn't made a good point from time to time, right? He was correct. John Maynard Keynes is correct that in the long run, we're all dead. Very true. Doesn't mean that we shouldn't conserve or save for the future, but also there is a live for today, you only live once, YOLO attitude of which we should enjoy life as it is, right? Not to live, necessarily and underneath crushing, tyrannical debt, but to say that a broader perspective in life will serve you well. And that specifically applies, in my opinion, to Richard Nixon, who had a long list of things that I think libertarians would agree with if they could see the forest for the trees. But of course, I think the problem with ideologues, of which I'm becoming less and less of as I get older, which I think is just a natural consequence of having an open mind, which ironically puts me in a smaller and smaller box. As I get my perspective gets broader and broader, your ability to fit in with ideologues or to fit inside of groups or to be a member of groups gets smaller and smaller. You become more isolated the more you're able to think for yourself and you don't fit into one, narrow worldview, if you will. I sort of feel like that's what I've been undergoing in the last, 5 or 6 years as I've started to broaden my perspective of things. I see even some merit in approaches by men like Richard Nixon. And I reject and disagree fundamentally with the libertarian rejection of Ronald Reagan, for example, despite the many things that I disagree with him on, including the war on drugs, et cetera, et cetera. Right? Libertarianism has got to be about more than drugs, people. For the love of God, I'm so sick of drugs. I completely agree with the libertarian position of ending the war on drugs, and I think that it's a great evil in this world. And Richard Nixon certainly started the war on drugs, and that bears mentioning. But I mean, please forgive my language. For the love of fuck, can we talk about something else other than drugs? Like, there are more important things at stake than your ability to get high. There are more important things. It is an intrinsic right to own your body and to do with it as you please. But there are bigger issues at stake sometimes than just your ability to get high, for the love of God. Okay, sorry to sound like an authoritarian socialist statist or whatever, but I do want to talk about something else at some point other than drugs. Hillary Clinton ever make a good point, says Quest Fanning? Yes, actually. If you read, and Hillary Clinton voter, the funny thing was about Hillary Clinton was that, remember when we were all freaking out about Hillary's emails? And one of the things that was like the leak that came out of WikiLeaks was the revelations of Hillary Clinton in her Goldman Sachs speeches was that she was actually more about international free markets and international trade than people let on. Like, she was actually attacked by that. As a matter of fact, one of the reasons why Hillary Clinton is so attacked by the right is because the right has become more anti-capitalist, and people like Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton actually have an underpinning that is an understanding of market liberalization more than most of the prominent figures on the right today. Take a look at J.D. Vance or Josh Hawley or others. I mean, these are people, these national conservatives, who are explicitly hostile to capitalism and to free markets and international trade, or the liberalization of trade, right? I mean, Hillary Clinton is closer to Ayn Rand than Josh Hawley or J.D. Vance. I'm sorry to say it, but that's absolutely true. And we're going to have a discussion about that more when we get into the discussion about Richard Nixon, who, of course, liberalized trade with China and engaged in nuclear détente with Soviet Russia. We're going to talk about that and all of this in the context of that song, Men North of Richmond. This is going to be one of the shows today that's going to kind of blow your mind, and it's going to make some of you angry, and some of you are going to leave, and that's what it's going to be. Miss TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership. Yeah, and didn't Rand Paul support the Trans-Pacific Partnership? I'm pretty sure he did. It was Donald Trump that killed it, but I'm fairly certain that it was a point of contention in 2016 in the presidential debates that Rand Paul had to correct Donald Trump about the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and that this was a deal that actually excluded China, right? This was actually a way for us to be able to work around and create a free trade zone that excluded China. And, Donald Trump was saying, oh, this benefits China. It's like, well, by excluding them from a trade agreement, right? So again, something to think about. Clinton almost lost my vote when she changed her mind on TPP to the populist no. Isn't that interesting? Yes, sometimes the truth hurts. And today you're going to get the truth, and it might hurt. But if you tune out because you don't like what you're hearing today, it might be that you might need to just take a step back and say, hey, listen, there's a broader perspective on some of these things. You have to talk about drugs like that because stoners, says Gwilkas, right? We're going to talk today about that as well. All right, let's get to Vivek Ramaswamy. I'm going to play his song that he did for you. I can't play too long of it because I'm going to get a copyright strike on it. If you're listening to the show later and you're wondering why the Vivek Ramaswamy rapping part of this video is not there, it's because I had to delete it in order to monetize this video on YouTube. So just an FYI, I won't play very much of it. Hopefully I won't get a strike, but we will see. This I'm playing this not because I'm trying to play music in the background, but because this is actual political news. So YouTube, please don't censor me, okay? Here's Vivek Ramaswamy's rendition of Eminem in front of a crowd of the whitest people at the whitest kids at the Iowa State Fair.
His mouth, but the words won't come out. He's joking how everybody's joking now. The clock's run out, time's up, over, plow, snap back to reality. Oh, there goes gravity. Oh, there goes gravity. Choke. He's so mad. But
now the best part of this is not the song itself. Vivek is, he's really into it. He's giving his best performance, if you will, and you got to give him credit for standing up and getting in front of a crowd like that. But it's funny. I don't know. Maybe this crowd is not the right crowd for a song like this, because like what you want them to be doing is being like, yo, oh, like at a concert. But I mean, it's the whitest people on earth. It's white people at the Iowa State Fair. So that you can see the best part of this video is the crowd reaction here. So you take a look at the reaction.
He won't give up that he won't back that he knows his own back that he's hopes, his own bad that he's broke, he don't matter.
Yeah, it's not bad, but you need the crowd to get fired up here. Come on, white people. Can't we just get it along a little bit? Come on, can't we just a little bit, people? Give him a little something.
He's so stagnant, he knows when he goes.
I love this white chick with the Karen haircut over here. She's watching the crowd and stuff like that. It's like, oh yes, we got Vivek Ramaswamy. This guy's running for president of the United States, yo.
This mobile home, that's when it's back to the lab again, yo. This old rhapsody. Better go capture this moment and hope it don't lose yourself in the music.
Oh, there we go. We got one fist in the air right there. There it is. Yeah, give it up to the white boy with a fist in the air. Oh, I guess it's a white boy song, right? Why is Vivek Ramaswamy appropriating white culture here? Eminem's a white rapper, and he better put some respect on it. Honestly, I'm sick and tired of these mother trucking Indians coming in and stealing our mother trucking culture. Am I right? This is appropriation. All right. Well, let's get it serious here. Vivek Ramaswamy, in an absolutely stunning response to someone who confronted him at the Iowa State Fair with the revelation that she is pansexual, asked him about the LGBTQ community. I have to say, his response to that question was absolutely beautiful and brilliant. If you haven't heard it, take a listen to this.
I was just wondering, what were your opinions on the LGBTQ plus community?
Well, I don't think it's one community.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, how could it be? Just mash together an alphabet soup. Trans is fundamentally in tension with gay, if you ask me. But what's your opinion?
I'm personally pansexual, so I was
Okay.
just wondering what your views on same-sex couples were.
I don't have a negative view of same-sex couples, but I do have a negative view of a tyranny of the minority. So I think that in the name of protecting against a tyranny of the majority, and there are times in this country's history where we have had a tyranny of the majority, we have now, in the name of protecting against tyranny of the majority, created a new tyranny of the minority. And I think that that's wrong. I don't think that somebody who's religious should be forced to officiate a wedding that they disagree with. I don't think somebody who is a woman who's worked really hard for her achievements should be forced to compete against a biological man in a swim competition. I don't think that somebody who's a woman that respects her bodily autonomy and dignity should be forced to change clothes in a locker room with a man. That's not freedom, that's oppression. And so I believe that we live in a country where free adults should be free to dress how they want, behave how they want, and that's fine. But you don't become oppressive by foisting that on others. And that especially includes kids, because kids aren't the same as adults. And so I think adults are free to make whatever choices they want, but do not foist that ideology onto children before children are in a position as adults to make decisions for themselves.
Yes.
And so I think a lot of the frustration in the country, and if I'm being really honest, that I also share, comes from that new culture of oppression where saying those things can actually get somebody punished. And in my case, it's part of why it's my responsibility to say them. And I respect that you may have a different opinion, and that's okay. It's part of what makes our country great is that you and I can be civil and have this conversation, and that we live in a country that still gives us, each of us, the right to speak.
That was a good
to
answer.
a presidential candidate and back, and still say that we pledge allegiance to the same nation.
It's good stuff. I mean, obviously, the last stuff there is a little bit of pablum, but right there, I think he really nailed it here. Where he talks about the tyranny of the minority. And I like also that he didn't disrespect her, that he was very respectful in general and gave a good response. Well, I mean, I got to say, 2 thumbs up there to Vivek Ramaswamy. Here's how he can still win. Never going to be president, though. I think really he's just angling for a vice presidential pick here for the nomination. But honestly, I don't know that that's going to happen. I saw that Carrie Lake was in Iowa as well, which why would Carrie Lake be in Iowa? She's not running for president of the United States. I think Carrie is probably hoping that she's going to get the VP slot pick from Donald Trump, which, I think it would probably be kind of like a Sarah Palin kind of a deal where at the end of the day, she would probably drag him down. That's just my opinion. Even if you like Carrie Lake, he probably should pick somebody who has maybe won an election in the past, right? And you're like, Austin, you've never won an election. Well, I'm not running for vice president of the United States, right? So my thoughts are that we probably need to see a stronger vice presidential candidate than either Vivek Ramaswamy or Carrie Lake, because honestly, I'm going to tell you, I think Donald Trump is going to clinch it, because I'm pretty sure he's got 70% chance here. Here's what I'm reading according to election betting odds. So this is a site run by our friends, John Stossel and Maxim Lott. And their site, Election Betting Odds, aggregates betting odds from overseas bookies and other prediction markets. Trump is a runaway favorite, with the site calculating he has a 70% chance to take the GOP nomination in 2024. Trailing behind him at 9.6% is not DeSantis, but Vivek Ramaswamy. He actually leads DeSantis. DeSantis is at 9.5%, so it's not a huge lead, but it does represent an enormous fall for DeSantis, who, according to a graph on election betting odds, was favored over Trump in late 2022. So this odds checker represents the opinion of people who are putting down their actual money, right? They're betting their actual cash. These aren't people who are just being polled or whatever, who might say one thing or say another, right? These are people who have something on the line. And I actually take this as stronger indicators than regular polls for that reason. Right? The overseas betting market showed Trump as a roughly 2-5 favorite, meaning a $100 wager would return $140 if Trump wins. Not bad, but depending on the bookmaker, Ramaswamy is offered at odds of 9-1, so a $1,000 return on a $100 bet if he wins. Man, how come we can't have this betting over here in the United States? DeSantis is listed at 10-1. So if DeSantis wins, if you bet $100 on DeSantis overseas, then you get a $1,100 return. So if you had to bet, which candidate would you put your money on? Honestly, here's the thing. I think that's a really good I really think that that's a good indicator of how it went. So here we go. Tell you what, let's do it by super chats. There you go. So drop a super chat or a Rumble donation, if you will, for which candidate you think, not the one you want to win, but the one that you think will win. Okay. Now, this is your own money. So doesn't that change your calculation? Because I know some of you are not going to donate. That's fine to the show, even though you should support the Wake Up America show so that we can survive and make it to next year and have another float trip or whatever Cantina crew. Next year, we're going to Las Vegas, baby. What do you say? Hey. So speaking of Las Vegas, bet with your super chats today. Who do you think will win? Not who do you want to win. Who do you think will win? And if you want as well, for that same chat, you can say who you think will be the vice presidential candidate from Donald Trump. So there we go. Betting odds are the only reliable poll, say Elizabeth Press. I agree. I think they are the only reliable poll. So Elizabeth Press calling me a shameless hustler. Very true. No shame, no shame. So that's a 0 return. So says Maria Krabs. Yes. Kermode Bear says, why can't we have more politicians like Vivek? Agree with him or not, he will engage and give long, thoughtful answers. Yes, I like that very much. Guokas0422 says, it's time for token VP. Yes, the time for token VPs is over. We need a stronger VP who can win a presidential election in the future. Exactly. That's my thought. Glenn Youngkin. You know, what do you guys think about that? I'm reading more and more that there is a possibility that Glenn Youngkin gets into the race. And somebody was asking me, I think, Matt Unruh was asking yesterday. And Matt, if you're on the road this morning with Robin, I hope you guys are driving safe. It was great to meet you guys this weekend in person. But what about the possibility of Glenn Youngkin running for president? I think I think that would be super interesting to see Glenn Youngkin as VP. But, we don't know what's going to happen here in the next year. Like, absolutely anything can happen. We've still got a lot of time before things start to really get crazy in terms of the primary. And, we don't know if we're going to have any debates. I mean, that's still up in the air. But honestly, I just don't know. I'm not calling it, and I know a lot of people have already jumped in on one side or another of a candidate. I think that's wrong-headed at this point. I think and the reason why I haven't jumped in is because I want to see how these candidates perform. I want to see how they debate, and I want to keep an open mind about a lot of things, including this next clip that I have of me agreeing with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I know I can't do anything right today, you guys, but Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez actually said something that I agree with for once. And you know what? I'm not mad about it. She did a video where she talked about the overregulation of sunscreen in this country. Take a listen.
What are we here to talk about today?
We are here to talk about sunscreen, specifically U.S. sunscreen, and how to fix it. Hello, everyone.
I know. I should have actually worn a little bit more sunscreen this weekend because you could see from my chesticles, my breasticles, I got a little extra sun on my chest. Although it made my boobs look a little bit smaller, though, because when you're tan, the more tan you are, it makes you look a little bit slimmer. And I'm on the heavier side these days, so I get a little nice suntan, makes my boobs look a little bit more manly, right? A little bit less breasticles, right? More testicles, if you will. So, anyways, let's continue.
This is Rep AOC, and I'm here with Charlotte Palomino.
I'm a brand owner, but also a licensed esthetician. U.S. sunscreen regulations are not necessarily making us more safe or better products.
U.S. sunscreens are far behind the rest of the world. I was in South Korea earlier this year, and it is so clear how far advanced the rest of the world is on sunscreen, and we deserve better here in the US.
How does the
Great.
FDA regulate?
FDA is different than the rest of the world in that we regulate sunscreen as a drug instead of a cosmetic.
Can we just abolish the FDA then, please? Isn't that really the answer to all of our problems? The balm and Gilead, if you will? Or the bag bomb, there we go. Hey, thanks so much for the super chat, Doug. I just saw it flash up by my screen. Normally I have a cell phone, but I don't have a cell phone today, so I only see these when they pop up on the screen. I'll take the under, says Doug H. There we go, Doug. Let's continue with AOC, with me agreeing with AOC. She looks very nice with the glasses, by the way. Hair looks on point.
It's regulated as a drug, has far more stringent standards, far more testing, far more scientific and clinical trials that are required, which is good. We want to make sure that things are safe. However, sometimes that can add a lot of bureaucratic and costs that prevent us.
Of bureaucratic and costs? Oh, really, AOC? Okay, hold on here. Hold on.
However, sometimes that can add a lot of bureaucratic and costs.
The U.S. has awful sunscreen compared to Asia and Europe. Strict, decades-old FDA rules are to blame. I love it when Democrats finally start to see the light about the policies that they have. On like one policy, they'll realize, oh my God, the FDA is terrible in regards to the ability for us to bring products to market that are superior because of the overregulations and the bureaucracy. Maybe that means that we should also work to deregulate the airline industry as well. No, we must have safety regulations or the planes will all fall out of the sky.
Costs that prevent us from getting any sunscreen filters at all.
And just for context, it has been since 1999. It was the last time that we had a new sunscreen filter in the United States.
When we compare the US standards to European standards in 2017, a Sloan Kettering study found that only half of US sunscreens met European protection standards. Here's the thing though, there is something that we can do about this. Congress has not been very aware of this issue, which is why there hasn't been a lot of momentum behind this issue. Truly, it's not too corny. Please contact your member of Congress, especially if your member of Congress sits on the Energy and Commerce Committee. They have jurisdiction over the FDA. However, any member of Congress can develop attention and draw attention to this issue. Ask them to break through some of the regulatory barriers at the FDA and fund public research so that we can all enjoy the filters that develop out of this.
Oh, man. You had me until the end there.
No, God,
Right up until the end there, not gonna lie.
No!
And fund public research. God, can we just please not fund the public research? How hard is it to get good sunscreen? Just take the sunscreen that they're making overseas and just make it here in the United States. But why are we classifying sunscreen as a drug? It doesn't make any sense. Joni Rankin's laughing. LOL, that esthetician's face. Yeah, you can tell that she's an esthetician, right? Just from the way she looks, right? That's that very like overly produced look, right? And that color of lipstick is very much like, I want to be taken seriously, if you know what I mean, right? This is very much, I'm fun and I'm pretty and I'm also an esthetician and take me seriously because my lipstick is a very sensible shade of brown or whatever the hell that is. If you're just tuning into the Wake Up America show, good morning. Hope you're doing great today. Happy Monday. I'm feeling fit as a fiddle. Feeling fine. After a great weekend with the Cantina crew, all the friends of the Wake Up America show who gathered this weekend in Missouri in the Ozarks, we all got together. Quest Fanning and his family, and Matt Unruh, and Doug Ashby, and Robbie Thierman, and Camelia Peterson, and Joni Rankin, and everybody just had a great time. Stephanie Peterson and myself all got together for a lovely canoe trip, and it was a beautiful day, and the only bad thing that happened is I lost my phone at the bottom of the river. Everything else went fine, and we had a good time, and it definitely brought us closer together, and I definitely feel more connected to the people who are part of the Wake Up America show. I know Quest Fanning is still in Missouri, and he and the family are going to be headed out tomorrow from St. Louis. He's gotten to taste some of the best food of Missouri, from what I understand. I think he did go to Jack Stack in Kansas City, but I hope that when he goes to St. Louis, he tries some of their St. Louis style ribs because those are the best. Elizabeth Fanning Press asking the real question says, is AOC a waxer? What kind of accents are we talking about here? Not sure. And don't forget to click that like button and subscribe to the channel if it's your very first time watching the Wake Up America show. And if it's your very first time here, you should know that we are brought to you in part by our friends over at Lear Capital. I was talking to our friends this weekend about just how important the role of companies like Lear Capital are to help alternative media like the Wake Up America show be brought to you every single day. So Lear Capital has got a great special going on for those of you who are interested in investing in gold and silver. I know Doug Ashby is a big gold and silver buyer. He loves silver. Well, Doug, you should definitely give him a call today because they've got a deal going on. When you buy an ounce of gold, you can get an ounce of silver for free, but you got to call them to get that deal. The phone number is right up there. Write it down. And I know a lot of people are shy or nervous about phone calls and stuff. They're not going to pressure you real hard or give you a bunch of like high pressure sales tactics or anything like that. They're just going to give you the information that you need to be able to make an informed decision. And we could all use that. But if you are terrified of the phone, they have set up a website for me so that we can track our commissions and say, hey, look, Austin Peterson's got a fan base who supports him and they're buying gold and silver from us. That's a great reason for us to continue to invest in the Wake Up America show. So it's in your best interest, if you're a fan of the show and if you're a fan of financial security, to invest in gold and silver. Why don't you head over to learaustin.com today at learaustin.com and just get more information. You sign up for that gold and silver packet and they will send you more information in the mail about how you can invest not only in hard metals directly, but you can also buy gold and silver and put it in your Roth IRA. So you get those tax benefit and advantages. What do you think about that? Wouldn't that be nice? All right, I'm going to take a quick commercial break just so I don't blow out my voice. But when I get back, we've got a lot more great content to go. Coming up next, we've got Jon Miltimore. Oh, shoot, I'm late. 10 minutes late for John. He's going to kill me. Obama's weird gay stuff and why we lost our AAA credit rating when we get back on the Wake Up America show at wakeupAmericaShow.com.
Donald Trump and I approve this message. Believe me, Austin Peterson is the best. He's got the greatest Wake Up America show I've ever seen. Whenever I tune in the mornings and watch the live stream, let me tell you, he has got the absolute best content. I love his guests. It's just a total blast to watch, and I highly endorse and recommend the Wake Up America show. It's terrific, believe me.
Hello, my name is Kelvin. Welcome to Frenchy Bush. This is my Didi's website, and I've decided to speak to you with my real voice for the first time ever to tell you about how cool Frenchy Bush is. But I've decided that this is the perfect opportunity to share with you. Frenchy Bush is a good website. You should follow us on socials. If you like Frenchies or any kind of bulldogs, me and my new brother George are going to try to make your life more fun.
Hello, I'm George. My neck isn't really thick yet, but it will be. We are so glad you're here. Please ignore my floating eyeball. It helps me spot predators who might be approaching from the sides.
Didi made Frenchy Bullshit to review things that he uses on me and my brother to tell you if it's good or bullshit. Take this collar, for example. Didi really likes it. Didi said it's really handy because us Frenchies got thick necks. Need something really tough. People think Frenchies are little, but if you look at us from below, you can see we are really pretty buff. Beefcake, yes. Look at my creamy thighs and chest. Yes, you like that?
Big brother, please focus.
Frenchy Bullshit. Please follow us for more great content and read the Frenchy Bullshit blog for more fun and cool stuff.
I'm a public defender.
I am a public defender.
I'm proud to be a public defender.
80% of Americans accused of a crime will get appointed a public defender.
Everybody from a speeding ticket to capital murder.
For every dollar we spend on public defenders, we spend $3 on prosecutors.
Public defenders have to do pretty much everything on their own.
Social workers, counselors.
Investigating is another piece of it.
The average public defender holds 300 cases annually.
You never feel like there's enough time.
Public defenders have health issues all the time.
A lot of people people give up and say, I can't do this work anymore.
Gideon's Promise trains, mentors, and supports public defenders.
There are a lot of people who say that they would not still be public defenders, but for Gideon's Promise.
It's fueled me to continue on in this fight.
Gideon's Promise has changed the face of public defense.
People see us as troublemakers.
Good trouble only.
We don't make it easy. It should not be easy to take away someone's liberty.
Tired of spending your hard-earned money on woke corporations that don't share your pro-freedom values? Fed up with sipping liberal lattes and progressive cappuccinos? Introducing Founding Flavors from AP for Liberty Shop. Get your day started with Washington's Revolutionary Roast. As robust and principled as the man himself, this blend is the shot of energy heard round the world. Or maybe you want to taste the fervor of freedom with Adams's Patriotic Perk. It's as dynamic and balanced as the U.S. Constitution, sure to awaken your spirit of liberty. For the aficionados, we've got the Jeffersonian Java, a complex mix of flavors that speaks volumes about your refined tastes. And don't forget Betsy's Liberty Lullaby, our decaf option, crafted with the same care and dedication Betsy Ross put into our Star-Spangled Banner. This blend lets you enjoy the taste of freedom anytime without losing sleep. No woke beans here, folks, just pure patriotic pro-freedom flavors brewed with love for liberty. So why compromise your principles for a cup of coffee? Stand up for your values, perk up your patriotism, and start your day the American way. Get your Founding Flavors at apforlibertyshop.com. Good morning, Rise and Freedom. I'm Austin Peterson. You're watching and listening to the Wake Up America show at wakeupAmericaShow.com. We're glad to have you here. If you're just tuning in, make sure that you click that like button. And if it's your first time watching the show today and you're enjoying this content, the Wake Up America show is every Monday through Friday from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. Central Time. You can watch it live by clicking the subscribe button on whichever channel that you're joining us on this morning. And I'd like to ask you a favor, if you don't mind. I'm not just some faceless, flat 2D picture guy here. I'm a real person streaming live here. I'd like to ask you personally a favor. If you've been enjoying the content for some time now, why don't you invite a friend to come and watch this show? We do great interviews, breaking news, some of the best clips, all the news that you can use from a liberty perspective 5 days a week. And we love to make friends here. As a matter of fact, just last weekend, the Cantina crew, all the supporters of the Wake Up America show got together and we had a big canoe float trip over the weekend. So we'd like to get to know you personally and we'd love to make friends. So introduce yourself if you haven't already and invite a friend to watch the show. Click subscribe and that way you'll get the updates whenever we go live. All right. So one serious topic and one hilarious topic. I don't really get too much into the conspiracy theories about Obama's birth certificate or about Michelle Obama, who may or may not have a penis, because I think that's just kind of like the boomer, like conspiracy stuff, right? I'm more into the Illuminati conspiracies. No, just kidding. But when I read this article the first time, I said to myself, this is something that I have to dismiss. But now that it's getting a little bit more widely reported, I actually feel like I need to pay attention to it a little bit more, which means, of course, you have to. Barack Obama apparently told one of his ex-lovers, "I make love to men daily, but in the imagination." Well, I guess now we're going to talk about it. Joining us now to discuss is a man who you would expect to talk about economic topics, which we will get into in just a moment, the AAA credit rating, but we're going to talk about some gay stuff for a moment. Jon Miltimore, managing editor of the Foundation for Economic Education. Jon, sorry I'm late.
Hey, no problem, AP. Good to be with you this morning.
Glad to be with you as well. Jon, a bit of an eye-opener this morning and a head-scratcher.
Yeah, no, this was fascinating. I read the interview that David Samuels did with David Garrow last week, I think. And if people are listening and you haven't read that, go read the Tablet Magazine interview. It's fantastic. It's like 10,000 words long. It's a long read, but it's worth it's very good. David Garrow is a wonderful historian. He's not a crank historian by any means. He's, you see him all the time on PBS. He's very good. He has a great reputation. Did this book, I think, back in 2017, and it just didn't get read very much. And I think it's because, you know, like we were in the middle of the Trump craziness, a different thing, and the book didn't get much attention. But this isn't a conspiracy theory. This was, you know, these were letters that Obama wrote to, he enjoyed writing letters to the women. You know, he dated, I think, 3 women, was in serious relationships with women before he married Michelle. And apparently he wrote these thoughts. And I got to preface anything I say with not that there's anything wrong with that, right? Like the old Seinfeld, you know, quip, you know, anything, you know, touching on homosexuality. For me, the big question was, why haven't we heard anything about this, right? Like, I don't think there's any other presidential candidate in modern history that could have wrote something like that and not been scrutinized in a way, you know. And to me, the obvious conclusion is like the love affair media has had with Obama all along. They just didn't give him the same scrutiny they give to other presidential candidates.
This is probably the kind of thing that you would think that the left media would be all over and be like, oh, this is positive. I mean, it's going to make them like him even more.
No, that did cross my mind. And like right now, I've Googled a couple times to see who's actually picking this up. Only, you know, a little conservative media in some sites I haven't heard of. Hasn't been in the New York Times yet, hasn't been in the Washington Post yet, or Time Magazine. My prediction is they'll get there, but they first have to think, okay, how do we feel about this? And then they'll praise him. They'll talk about how honest he was in sharing his reflections as a young man and so forth. But I think the interview went way beyond this little snippet, and they really talked about important ideas about how much Obama likes to control the narrative, and why he's that president that is still in DC, right? Like there's been for more than 100 years, there's been this tradition: presidents leave DC when they're no longer president, and Obama has stuck around, and they're trying to figure out why. And how involved is he in this stuff? And there's some really important questions, but for me, it really clarified for me. I've said this for years. I'm going to lose some of the audience here. I'm going to probably piss off people on both sides a little bit. For years, I've said Trump is very much like Obama. They are both very thin-skinned. They can't handle criticism. They're very narcissistic, and I think they're both very shallow. And so I always said, Trump's and Obama are really two sides of the same coin. The difference is Obama hides this much better than Trump. But and for people listening that don't like that answer, my response is, I think most politicians are like this, but I think they're hyper like that. They really love the attention. And something in that interview with Samuels and Garrow really stuck out to me, and it was how much Obama obsesses about winning. Right? We hear Trump say that all the time, but with Obama, that's really what his legacy comes down to. He wants it to be looked at as winning, as triumphal. That's what really matters to him. Because if you look back at the presidency, it's hard to find okay, what was his presidency about? Was there one big success? I think if you listen to those guys, it'll be remembered mostly for his foreign policy failures. But for Obama, I think it really matters that he's seen as a winner. And to me, that's very Trump-like. As far as, his fantasies go, I think they're credible. He was a young man and grew up in, let's not forget, Obama grew up in he had a wild childhood, right? And lived in between cultures. And if you read Garrow's book, you can see, he really believes it had a profound impact on his character. And I think Obama has really, his entire life felt out of place, like he didn't belong anywhere. And that kind of has molded his presidency. It molded his presidency, and it's definitely an under talked about part of his legacy.
Yeah, he wrote in his in this letter, "My mind is androgynous to a great extent, and I hope to make it more so until I can think in terms of people, not women as opposed to men. But in returning to the body, I see that I've been made a man, and physically in life, I choose to accept that contingency." It's kind of fascinating because it sort of mirrors the woke narrative, the woke mindset that in some ways Obama has, at least on a public level, has condemned some of the more radical aspects of wokeism, if you've seen.
Yeah, no, I think your analysis is spot on. It's a very postmodern view of the body, of the soul. Like these things are just kind of, my body's just a vehicle, for me. And to the extent that it really is, overlaps with my mind, that's up to me. And so again, young man sorting things out. But to me, again, I look at that and I find that something like that kind of tragic, because I'm admittedly old fashioned in some of these things. I raised my kids. I do not want my kids to think this way. Like since I've been, since they've been little, my boys get blue things, my daughter gets pink, and it was just like one of those things. And I didn't really think about it that much, but maybe I sensed like we're going in this direction where even things like gender, I don't want my kids to be confused about their gender. I want them to be like, life's hard enough. If you're struggling with gender dysphoria or some of these other things, I think life can be harder. So I didn't want my kids to kind of have that. Like that for them, it's all very simple. And you don't have to be super, as your children grow older. My boy will wear a pink shirt to church or something. Like I don't sweat it that much, but especially with small children, I kind of like the idea that they don't have to think about these things, let alone be taught in school to think that way. That's sort of where we entered now. Like these questions, whether you like it or not, often come up, and you got to have answers for those things. I liked it when those things didn't come up, and we weren't really thinking along those lines, in this hyperactive way.
Yeah, and it is important for those who are tuning in might be a little bit skeptical about this. Like this is confirmed in an actual letter that is owned by Emory University. So this is a letter that Obama said this to a former girlfriend, Alex McNear, and it's got the U.S. stamp on it, Barack Obama's signature, and a handwritten letter that he wrote to his ex-girlfriend about how he talks about himself making love to men in his mind daily. He says, in regard to homosexuality, I must say I believe this is an attempt to remove oneself from the present, a refusal perhaps to perpetuate the endless farce of earthly life. You see, I make love to men daily, but in the imagination. I guess no wonder they broke up. I can imagine that. If I was a girlfriend, if you got a letter like that and you were his girlfriend, you might be like, nah, I don't know. Maybe some chicks are into that, but I imagine probably not.
Really? No, imagine receiving that letter and hearing, like, I'm dating this man, and he says, oh, on a daily basis, he's making love to men in his mind. It'd be very jarring. But that's one of the things, if you look at all these letters, they're very much Obama just pouring himself out onto paper. Like he's not asking them about anything about their lives, or like how, it's really just sort of him going through this inner struggle and inner reflections and things. And again, to me, that's sort of narcissistic, right? Like it's all about him. Again, no surprise the relationships, didn't work. What's interesting too, like going, beyond the sexual fantasies, like one of the things Garrow talks about a lot in his book is that Obama was obsessed with being president for early on. And Michelle kind of thought he was a nut for it. She's like he kept going back, like, I'm going to be president. And you could tell she was very skeptical of all this. And all of a sudden then he takes off. She's like, oh my gosh, he's really going to be president. He was driven. But you can sense in this, he was a very confused young man. He had a very, very strained relationship, difficult with his father. And it's one of the things that's interesting. The lawyer who David Garrow was working with on this book said, Garrow interviewed Obama, I think 3 times. And the one thing that the lawyer said before the interview said, just don't ask him about his dad. I found that interesting.
That is interesting. If you're just tuning into the Wake Up America show, good morning. I'm your host, Austin Peterson. I'm speaking to Jon Miltimore. He's the managing editor of the Foundation for Economic Education. Now we're going to move off of the Obama gay stuff, and we're going to talk about something perhaps of a bit more consequence. Why did the United States lose its AAA credit rating, Jon?
Well, because if you look long term, we're in a very dire fiscal situation. And it's kind of funny because I think if you ask, there's really a great effort to control this narrative. The Biden White House and a lot of Democrats want you to think this never would have happened if it wasn't for the debt ceiling showdown. When Fitch downgraded them, they don't mention Republicans, and they allude very briefly to the debt ceiling issues. I think it's legitimate to say that was like one part of but they make it very clear that the showdown was because of these larger structural problems that aren't being addressed. And you know, to me, I've said it for years, the biggest, the most overlooked single issue in this country is the federal debt. And it's like one of those things, there's almost an agreement between parties not to talk about it. It gets no attention. We talk about all this culture war stuff, the fact that we're $33 trillion in debt, and that debt keeps, you know, we're in the era now of $1 trillion deficits each year, you know, whether it's going to be 1 trillion or 2 trillion, you know, but all of that means that we're spending a vast amount of money now just to finance that debt, to service the interest that we're on the debt. Now it's soon going to be $1 trillion a year. Soon we're going to be paying more on interest on the debt than the national defense. Think of that. So all of this, I think the writing's on the wall. There's huge problems here. You know, I think we need to take the downgrade seriously, because it's one of those things. This is Fitch saying, hey, we need to get our house in order. The problem is, I don't think there's a lot of inclination to do that. And you know, I'll go back, like there's both parties seem to kind of get in on this. I do think for Democrats, like if you didn't have Republicans at least pushing back some, we'd be Venezuela by now, right? Like it'd be all like everything you can spend and as much money as you can print. But we're heading that direction anyway if we don't eventually start to figure this out. The spending can't go up like this indefinitely.
Sorry, I hit that mute button there. So then what kind of solutions could be proposed, even if there aren't any solutions being proposed? I mean, are there any plans, fiscal plans, even like think tanks that are putting out plans, or has anybody tackled this question of like what kind of reforms would have to happen?
Every candidate's going to put out some plan, and it's going to get nobody's going to hardly look at it. I haven't heard any serious proposals. To me, I think the answer is that it begins with something we've done a couple times in our history, is just killing the national bank. For a long time in our country, we didn't have a national bank. Once you give the government the ability to print money, it's over. Like we're seeing it. Once they can just crank out money and use inflation to kind of increase spending and things, the writing's on the wall. I think that's why we ended up with these wars. These wars never would have been fought if they weren't able to just print money in this way. You know, if you look at the wars that we've been in as a country the last 50 years. So I think, you know, twice in this country we did it. We let the central bank die. I think we need to have a discussion on that. I think there's one or two people actually talking that way. I think DeSantis has said some things. RFK Jr. has said some things. RFK Jr. I think has been the best on this issue. Like he's been very outspoken about. He sounds almost like Ron Paul sometimes when he's talking about fiat money. But so for that reason alone, I like these, some of these candidates. We need more attention on these issues. That to me is the way to fix this.
That's good stuff. Jon Miltimore, is there anything else that you want to add before we let you go? I'm about to launch into a libertarian defense of Richard Nixon.
Oh, I'm going to stick around and watch that. So no, check out our content on feed.org, and I'm going to check out this defense of Nixon.
Okay, there it is. It's anathema to many libertarians, but if you stick around, you might hear something that I think you'll agree with. Jon Miltimore, managing editor of the Foundation for Economic Education. We appreciate your time very much today. Thanks for coming on the show on Miltimore Monday.
Hey, thanks for having me on, AP. Have a good week.
Thank you. See you next week, Jon. Thank you very much for your time. What do you think of Jon Miltimore? All right. Well, we've got lots more great content to go. There we go. He was the founder of the war on drugs. He instituted wage and price controls. He did all kinds of other anti-libertarian stuff. But why is this libertarian starting to rethink the legacy of Richard Nixon? Well, we'll talk about that when we get back on the Wake Up America show at wakeupamericashow.com.
Want an engaging website to boost your business? You're just a click away from 5-star Fiverr talent. Hundreds of freelancer skills like web design. Head to Fiverr.com today and get something started.
American conservatism is distinct, like America is distinct from the United Kingdom. American conservatism's roots comes out of the Wild West, out of pioneerism. The difference between American conservatives and European conservatives is that Americans are cowboys. We are that God, guns, gold, and girls. It's wild here, and we should stay that way. We shouldn't allow a European version of conservatism to come and infect us here. We like it wide open spaces here, deep in the heart of Texas and all that.
Hey there, it's your favorite Vice President Joe Biden. I wanted to talk to you today about the Wake Up America show, the best source for all your political news and commentary. But before I get started, let me just make sure I have all my notes in order. Okay, where was I? All right, the Wake Up America show. It's a great way to stay informed and make your voice heard. Boy, what was I saying again? Oh, right. The Wake Up America show. It's important that we all stay engaged and knowledgeable about what's going on in our country and, the thing. But hold on, where was I going with all this? Oh, yeah. The Wake Up America show. It's a fantastic resource. And if you really want to make a difference, man, you can sign up to be a monthly donor at wakeupAmericaShow.com/support. Now, where was I? Oh, that's right, the Wake Up America show. So if you want to stay woke and support a great cause, head on over to wakeupAmericaShow.com/support and sign up to be a monthly donor today. And if you're feeling generous, you can even give a donation in my name. Thanks for listening, and keep on keeping on, America. Come on, man.
Thank you for watching the Wake Up America show with my dad. Today, I'd like to share with you 3 reasons why you should visit Dad's online store at apforlibertyshop.com. Number 1, you can get exclusive freedom-loving merch designed by AP himself or me mom, Steffi. Liberty Laura has made some designs as well, and blimey, they are great. Number 2, most of these products are so wicked that they aren't even allowed to be advertised on Facebook or Instagram. Modern machine guns and a proper keychain. Plus, our Grover Cleveland t-shirt is so spicy apparently that leftists on Facebook specifically banned it from appearing on the website. Number 3, you're supporting liberty lovers just like you. Spend your money where you earn it, and you help me pups build a community that supports what you believe. Bloody hell, this commercial is running too long. Gotta run. Bye now. Don't forget to visit apforlibertyshop.com. That's apforlibertyshop.com.
Good morning. Rise and freedom. I'm Austin Peterson. You're watching and listening to the Wake Up America show at wakeupAmericaShow.com. Hope you're feeling good today on a Monday. If you missed the weekend party with the Wake Up America show, you missed the big fun time. We had a great time. All the friends of the Wake Up America show decided to come together this last weekend. Me and Camellia and Stephanie P. and Matt Unruh and Quest Fanning and Doug Ashby and Robbie Thurman and Joni Rankin. We all got together, and some of our families were there to have a great time and gather together to celebrate the almost 1-year anniversary of the Wake Up America show. This podcast project has been going on now as of September, the day after Labor Day, I think, is right after Labor Day is when we started the show. So coming up on our 1-year anniversary, and it's thanks in large part to the people who gathered together this weekend for a nice little float trip. And it was interesting too, because although we did have discussions about politics here and there, for the most part, most of the discussion was not about politics. It was just good old casual, good time, friendly banter and all that stuff. So I really appreciated that. But then If you are a fan of the Wake Up America show and you'd like to get together with us, I think we're going to make it an annual treat. So an annual retreat. So as long as the Wake Up America show is here next year, we'll find something else to do. And I have already voted for Las Vegas, but can I get a second on Las Vegas? I'd love to hear a second from that one. Can somebody say aye? For the very conservatives among you, it's
How
right.
dare you?
No, we must go to Bible camp. I'm glad to have you here on the Wake Up America show. If you haven't already, I know some of you forget to hit that Wake Up America show like button. Hit that Wake Up America show like button. We appreciate that very much. And subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thank you very much for all of your support. Just a quick note for those of you who are in the stream over on Rumble this morning. We appreciate your support, but don't forget, just ask if you don't mind Con 1216 before you drop links to other channels, just because it's not nice to promote your competing channel on our stream. I'm not saying that you can't do it forever, but I will say that when you do it like that, it's not very polite. So you should ask before you do things like that, if you wouldn't mind. I don't mind promoting other content creators, but usually you got to introduce yourself first, not just drop in the stream and try and gank my followers. All right. The Wake Up America show brought to you by listeners and viewers like you. Don't forget to drop a super chat today. I did drop my phone and lose it in the river. That was an expensive mistake. So I do appreciate Robbie and Quest Fanning this morning for dropping some super chats to help me replace that phone, because it's going to be expensive. And also we do appreciate, of course, Andy Opperman. He bought drinks for all of us on Friday night. That was super nice of you, Andy. Yeah. Conquistador says, I wouldn't survive Las Vegas. You wouldn't survive, or your liver wouldn't survive? I don't know. All right, so let's talk about Richard Nixon. Okay, so as someone who's been in the libertarian movement, we're going into big brain time right now. Has been in the libertarian movement for going on 15 years now. I've been to the top. I started out as a street activist in New York City, coordinating Tea Party events and fundraising for Congressman Ron Paul's presidential campaign as an unpaid volunteer, along with many other people. I think we had over 1,000 people as part of the Ron Paul NYC meetup starting in 2007. And from there, I've had a storied career, an illustrious career, full of the commanding heights and the lowest lows. So I've had the opportunity not only to consume all of the literature of libertarians and of Ayn Rand and Murray Rothbard and Ludwig von Mises and of many others, Friedrich Hayek and others, spent many hours listening to lectures at the Cato Institute and reading the works of scholars like Thomas DiLorenzo of the Mises Institute in Alabama. So I've had time to consume all of the literature, and I've had time to meet all of the libertarian heroes in person and ask them questions and get to know many of them personally. And in the case of Judge Andrew Napolitano, I've gotten to work for him directly and write some of his speeches for the show, and to coordinate and produce, and to sit and chat with Rand Paul casually, and sit down with Gary Johnson and John McAfee and John Stossel. And these are people who have been in my orbits, who have whispered in my ear over the years, sweet nothings in my ear. And in my time in politics, and mostly in the libertarian movement, right, I've spent most of my time and career being a very hardcore ideologue, which I think means by definition that there is a bit of a blinder on to competing ideologies or to competing ideas in general, right? When we're someone who believes very strictly in an ideology, especially a radical ideology like libertarianism, there is a hostility to ideas that contradict our own worldview. When I say our own worldview, I think that right there is being too broad, because there is no we, there is no our, right? And to speak in terms in the liberty movement is to speak as in collectivist terms, when we are really truly all individuals. And the more highly individualistic we become, the more atomistic we become, and the more variations there are in terms of our philosophy and views. Now, are there variations in terms of the ideology of the left? Sure, there are. As a matter of fact, if you go to the Wikipedia page for feminism, you'll find that there are about 10 to 13 different styles of feminism. Pan-feminism, Marxist feminism, radical feminism, libertarian feminism, leftist feminism. There are so many different worldviews and ideologies, and each one, of course, people who claim to hold hold an ideology will claim that theirs is the one true God. As I've grown older and wiser and consumed all of the literature that agrees with me, I have started to branch out. You get bored, right? With consistency, the great mind has nothing to do. And, I'm reminded of that quote by Ralph Waldo Emerson on self-reliance when he talks about this idea of consistency. Because remember, one of the things that we really admired and appreciated about Ron Paul was his consistency. He's been consistent, right? He's said the same thing for years. He's consistent. But what was interesting was that it really opened my eyes one day when people were talking about Bernie Sanders, and they were using the same language to describe Bernie Sanders as they were to describe Ron Paul. They were saying that Bernie Sanders was consistent. And at that point in time, it struck me that, yes, you can be consistent and be wrong. You can be consistently wrong. And then I fell back on this essay by Ralph Waldo Emerson, where he talks about self-reliance and this concept of consistency. And I found it fascinating when he described consistency thus: a foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds, adored by little statesmen and philosophers and divines. With consistency, a great soul has simply nothing to do. He may as well concern himself with a shadow on the wall. Speak what you think now in hard words, and tomorrow speak what tomorrow thinks in hard words again, though it contradict everything you say today. So you shall be sure to be misunderstood. Is it so bad, then, to be misunderstood? Pythagoras was misunderstood, and Socrates, and Jesus, and Luther, and Copernicus, and Galileo, and Newton, and every pure and wise spirit that ever took flesh. To be great is to be misunderstood. And as I read this article by Christopher Rufo over the weekend, titled "Bring on the Counter-Revolution," it solidified in my mind some of the beliefs that I have started to, I won't say change, but temper, perhaps moderate, in regards to my views of certain political figures in history, namely Richard Nixon. When you join the Libertarian movement and you get your Libertarian card and you realize you're still never going to be a real Libertarian, and then as you go through your fighting to become a real Libertarian phase, and you fight with other Libertarians about what it means to be a real Libertarian, and you desperately wish to be credentialed by other Libertarians as a true Libertarian, a hardcore Libertarian, a radical Libertarian, and you realize that you will never achieve this pursuit, that in this pursuit you will never achieve that goal. I think the wise among us begin to stop caring. And the wisest among us perhaps never cared at all. But in your pursuit of libertarianism, you are presented with a heroes list. Ron Paul, Murray Rothbard, Ayn Rand, Friedrich Hayek. And you're presented with an enemies list, right? A villains list of those who you must demonize. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Woodrow Wilson, Abraham Lincoln, and of course, Richard Nixon. And so therefore you unquestioningly criticize Richard Nixon for the obviously racist war on drugs, and for other positions like wage and price controls and taking the United States off of the gold standard in the Bretton Woods. And you believe these things not because your intellectual understanding has arrived at this conclusion, but perhaps like myself, you were inducted cult-like into a philosophy and an ideology that operates in a very similar way to radical Marxism, in that it has tenets, it has ethos, it has orthodoxy, and it has high priests, priestesses, and of course it has heretics, of which I am rapidly becoming one, pariahs, and those who are the non-believers in the faith, the one true religion. if you will, of the ideology. For if you wish to maintain purity within these spheres, you must adhere to orthodoxy. Now, for those of you who remember my conversation with Judge Andrew Napolitano last week, I got into just this discussion. When getting into the nitty-gritty dirt band, the conversation with Judge Napolitano and Big Brain Time, we were having a discussion about orthodoxy. And I asked Judge Napolitano this question, this idea that there are no sacred texts within libertarianism, right? There is no Bible of libertarianism, if you will. And therefore, who are we to trust or believe, or who are we to say holds the truth or the one true path? And at first, if you go back and listen to that interview, you'll hear Judge Napolitano say, well, when I read such and such by Murray Rothbard, I knew that this was the truth, etc. But when I pushed him on that, I said, well, what about when Rothbard said this in The Ethics of Liberty? He seemed resigned to accept the reality that there is no one true path, that the world does not exist as many of us would like it to exist in terms of black and white. And as our politics have become more tribalized, and as we find ourselves more and more divided, not only among partisan lines, but also amongst ideological lines, there are those of us who are beginning to see the shades of gray in between those black and white terms that everyone wishes to be painted in. Now, why does this happen? Well, it happens because, of course, it benefits politicians, but even more so, it benefits us to paint things in terms of black and white for the media, because as someone who has worked in the professional media and the amateur media my entire career, I can tell you that the opportunities to make money in the media are there for those who tell people what they wish to hear, and for those who maintain a consistent ethos. The people who are driven out of the highest temples of the mainstream media typically are those who become heretics or pariahs amongst their own people, and then, of course, become heroes to the other side. Right? They take up an ideology that they were once opposed to. As a matter of fact, consider that the people in the Republican Party at the time now who are at the very top of the Republican Party, who are seen as leaders of the Republican Party, were either non-political, as people like Vivek Ramaswamy, for example, were either non-political actors at all, didn't even vote until recently. Or they were actually Democrats on the other side. Look at Kari Lake, for example, and Donald Trump. These are both former Democrats, right? There are none who are so zealous as those who are newly converted, or the biggest opportunists understand that in switching to another ideological camp, that they will be lifted up and trotted out as heroes, as members of the new orthodoxy. This all swings us back to, of course, Richard Nixon, and the conversation that I'd like to have to you about a piece that I highly recommend that you read in total, of which I will be reading quite a bit from here today. I hope that you'll bear with me as we start this discussion about why I find myself more and more drawn to the history and knowledge of Richard Nixon's policies and views and his career, because one, I think that he is actually understudied. I paid attention to in all of my history classes and learned as much about world history, Western civilization, and American history as possible. But one of the least understood and probably least least studied characters of American history is Richard Nixon, in the time of Richard Nixon, because when you learn about this era, all that you really learn about is the war in Vietnam, and you mostly learn about the cultural revolution of the left. But what about the countercultural revolution, of which was actually the policy, the people who were behind Richard Nixon and the conservative Republicans who supported him? Now, of course, libertarians, when you're inducted into the libertarian movement, again, you're given your libertarian card. Richard Nixon is handed over to you as one of the villains of libertarianism, and as someone who more and more finds myself putting myself in contrast to orthodoxy. I consider myself to be very heterodox. I see more to like about Richard Nixon than I saw before. Whereas, and just saying these kinds of things or in libertarian groups, you will see them react as if you walk into a religious congregation and tell them that Jesus Christ is not the Son of God. This is very much the kind of behavior that exists in the liberty movement, which operates very much in a cult form, like any other ideologies, like wokeism, like leftism, socialism, Marxism, conservatism. Right? They all operate very much in cult mentality. But with Richard Nixon, I see things more than just the war on drugs or wage and price controls or the Bretton Woods agreement. Let's discuss some of the positive things of Richard Nixon's career before we get into some of this piece that I'd like to share with you today. Now, just a reminder to you that you are going to get into big brain time here. So if you're not into big brain stuff, then this is not for you. Détente with the Soviet Union. Nixon pursued a policy of détente, seeking to improve relations with the Soviet Union and reduce Cold War tensions, things that any libertarian could stand behind. The strategic arms limitation talks, or SALT agreements, were a key component of this policy aimed at limiting nuclear arms, which I think many libertarians, of course, would be in favor of. This policy included cultural exchanges, trade agreements, and diplomatic efforts to ease tensions. And I think trade relations and trade agreements, as well as treaties, are a bit of a libertarian blind spot, right? The legality of treaties. Now, many libertarians do agree that we need to have a constitution. Not all of them. Some libertarians are anarchists. They think the Constitution is terrible and should be overthrown, and I don't share that view. But the legality of treaties are what they are. For example, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, right? NATO, for example. Most libertarians will say that we need to abolish NATO or get rid of it. Well, but these are treaties that were passed and ratified by the U.S. Senate, meaning that these are constitutional treaties. So if we want to get rid of these treaties, then we should at least understand why these treaties exist in the first place. Of course, NATO is founded to prevent the spread and expansionism of Soviet Russia, which in its own way is a positive benefit, right? The expansion of Soviet Russia was terrible in the lives of the people who lived under the satellite states that Russia had under its control. And now we see an imperial Russia acting very much in a similar way with the war in Ukraine. Yes, I do break with many of the mainstream libertarians on the view of Russia and Ukraine. I very much see Russia as the aggressors in that war, but that's a conversation we'll have to have for another time. I do think that many libertarians, as a matter of fact, I know that many libertarians do buy into and believe and spread foreign disinformation on behalf of Russian and Chinese spy agencies. A lot of the disinformation that you'll see from prominent conspiracy theorists in the United States is given to them, and I think that many of them actually are on the payroll of foreign disinformation agents. You have to realize that the CIA and the NSA aren't the only evil government institutions that try and bring about bend actors to their will. Just saying that right there in a libertarian meeting would have me run out on a rail and crucified. Opening relations with China. Another positive from the benefit from Nixon's administration was that he started secret talks with China in the early 1970s and had a breakthrough in 1972 with his visit to China, making the first time that a U.S. president had visited the country. The normalization of relations between the United States and China helped reduce global tensions and open the door to increased trade and cooperation. Another major big libertarian win by Richard Nixon that libertarians don't give him enough credit for is the ending of the draft. The transition from the military draft to an all-volunteer force was signed into law by President Nixon on September 26, 1971. Now, I know that this is blowing some of your minds, but the next time you're in an argument with a libertarian who brings up the war on drugs, ask them if they think that there's some praise from Richard Nixon for ending the military draft in 1971. I think we should give him a little bit of credit for that. I think so, absolutely. Let's continue here. We're getting some great comments over on Rumble and YouTube, and I'd love to share them, but they're a little off topic there. Jacob Champion says, NATO was also to tie the hands of our allies. This was perhaps its main and best purpose. By taking over the logistics of war, we prevented our allies from launching yet another world war. That's a really good point, Jacob. And I think that also ties into the reason why the United States was founded as it was, with the northern states cooling off the southern states, in the sense that Alexander Hamilton in the Federalist Papers, and I know Alexander Hamilton, there's another pariah of libertarianism, boo. But he made good points when he talked about the idea that if we were independent sovereign states, would be more willing to go to war with one another. But if we are tied together in one nation, then the states were, of course, less willing to have that kind of conflict. But then, of course, there was that whole Civil War thing. But it's all over now, right? But maybe not. When I play that song, Men North of Richmond, a little bit later, it reminds me very much of the tensions between the North and South in the Civil War. We will get to that in just a few minutes. I am going to play that song and talk to you a little bit about how I feel about that on a sort of visceral level. Back to Richard Nixon. Some of the good things of Richard Nixon ending the draft. What about, so the Selective Service Act of 1948 was amended to end conscription. The change aimed to align military service with individual choice and reduce the involuntary nature of military recruitment. So we can give Richard Nixon some credit for that. Nixon's administration pursued tax reforms. In 1969, he signed the Tax Reform Act, which included tax cuts for both individuals and businesses, lowered the corporate tax rate, and increased deductions for individuals with the goal of encouraging investment and consumption. What about the decentralization of revenue sharing? This is another big one. The Revenue Sharing Act of 1972 aimed to provide federal funds to state and local governments with fewer restrictions, meaning that the bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. would have less say over how the money would be spent. We would like to see no federal government taking our money and sending it back to the states. But keep in mind, and we'll get to this piece from Christopher Rufo in a moment where he expands on this, if you're going to send money to the states, better that it doesn't contain the kinds of strings that bureaucrats would put on it before it gets here. And this, of course, these block grants allowed local governments to allocate funds based on their own priorities, right? So decentralizing decision-making. This is a big part of the Christopher Rufo article, excuse me. Criminal justice reform proposals. Now, this was an interesting one when it came to the war on drugs. I'm not defending the war on drugs in any shape or form, and I know that those who are my political enemies within the libertarian movement will jump all over this and try and distort what I'm saying, but let me say very clearly that I do not agree with the war on drugs. I think it's been entirely a disaster, and it should be abolished. That being said, one has to understand the context in which Richard Nixon passed this legislation. Remember, he didn't write these bills. He did sign them, but the president of the United States doesn't write laws, and I think too few people remember that far too few times. But Nixon's administration proposed the Comprehensive Drug Abuse Prevention and Control Act of 1970. But what was interesting about what Richard Nixon's approach was that it was less of a criminal justice approach to many of the problems of drugs and more of a reform proposition. The act aimed to emphasize treatment and rehabilitation for drug offenders over strict incarceration, right? It classified drugs based on their potential for abuse and established penalties accordingly. Do I disagree with this? Absolutely. But also there's a political context that we're forgetting about this one, and we remember that that a president has enemies, and that a president, in order to pass his agenda, has to be able to do so. In order to pass his agenda, he has to overcome the political will of his enemies, of whom many were embarking on terrorist acts in the United States. For example, the Weather Underground and the Black Panthers, right, were engaging in criminal acts of terrorism in the United States. Richard Nixon saw the war on drugs as a way to crack down on his enemies, of whom many were drug users. And while I may not agree with that approach, I don't have to agree with that approach in order to understand why the president made that decision in order to enact his policy agenda and to prevent the kind of crime that was being engaged in by leftist Marxist terrorist groups. Now, let's move on here, because I think that it's important for us to get to the heart of this piece here, the real big brain part of this. Bring on the counter-revolution, writes Christopher Rufo at City Journal. He says that America is trapped in the loop of 1968. He said that the politics of that fateful year have set the patterns and bounds of our national life for decades. And maybe there is a conspiracy here in that maybe there is a reason why public schools don't focus too much on this era, right? We learned about the Vietnam War and about the hippies and the counterculture as a response to these violent Republicans who were in the war in Vietnam, while forgetting the fact that it was John F. Kennedy and LBJ who got us into the war in Vietnam. You might even blame it, perhaps even in some ways, on Eisenhower, who was not the conservative Republican in the ways that we sort of think of conservative Republicans today, but we can debate that later. I think the first death in Vietnam, the American death in Vietnam that's listed on the Vietnam Memorial Wall is 1958, pretty sure, or 53 even, because it goes far back to like the French colonialism. Anyways, so in 1968, right, the Black Party, so it's almost like we live in this endless recurrence of 1968, writes Christopher Rufo. He says the Black Panther Party reappears as Black Lives Matter. The Weather Underground pamphlets launder themselves into academic papers. The Marxist-Leninist guerrillas trade in their bandoliers and become managers of an elite-led revolution in manners and mores. Is it mores? Manners or mores? Like a moray eel? That's a moray. The ideology, narratives, and aesthetics of the left-wing social movements, though now often degraded through cynicism and repetition, have maintained the position of a jealous hegemon, means someone who is protecting and guarding their power jealously, right? The cultural revolution that began a half-century ago is now reflected in a deadening sequence of acronyms: CRT, DEI, ESG, and more. This has become our new official morality. Many conservatives had made an uneasy peace with this transformation of values, even as the culture around them has, in many places, collapsed. As a matter of fact, I actually produced if you could believe it, I produced a Founding Flavors coffee video based around this concept. You know what? I'm going to go ahead and play it right now, because why not? I wasn't able to advertise it because I had a little bit of a cuss word in there. So, oh, no, looks like it's not up there. All right, hold on, guys. Give me Founding Flavors coffee YouTube. I'm going to take my stuff to the Old Town Road. I'm going to ride till I can't no more. I'm gonna take my horse to the Old Town Road. I'm gonna ride till I can't no more. Got a something in the back. Horse is batted black. I got boots that back to match. Ain't nobody tell me nothing. Here it is. Can't tell me nothing. Can't nobody tell me nothing. Can't tell me nothing. When I play this video for you, I'd appreciate it if you would all read the scrolls at the very bottom of the screen, if you can. It might be small on your mobile phone, but if you're watching us on a big screen TV, you should be able to read it just fine. Take a listen.
You have to force behaviors, and at BlackRock, we are forcing behaviors.
Mao ordered his citizens to throw off the four olds. Old thinking, old culture, old customs, and old habits. So, your whole life went in the garbage overnight, no biggie. And those who resisted were attacked by an army of purifiers called the Red Guard, who went around the country putting dunce caps on people. Yeah, who didn't take to being a new kind of mortal being.
If you don't force behaviors, whether it's gender or race or just any way you want to say the composition of your team, you're going to be impacted.
Well, things haven't been so sweet for Ben & Jerry's after the company posted an anti-American tweet, a few of them, on the 4th of July. The ice cream makers declared the United States was founded on stolen indigenous land.
Well, someone should tell Target that, because they're now selling swimsuits with tuckums in the women's section of the store. And they even have a line just for kids.
Yeah, we're going to reach out to Ben & Jerry's and ask them how they can live with themselves as they operate a multi-billion-dollar company on stolen land while declaring other people give up their so-called stolen land.
This is the child section. This is literally the kids section. I'm next to a literal onesie that says whatever the hell that means. We have glad you came out, and I'm so happy that you're queer. In the kids section. Are you kidding me? I'm sorry, but pride and toddler don't belong in the same sentence.
Good news! Starbucks will offer its workers reimbursement of travel expenses related to accessing abortion and gender-affirming procedures.
Kyle Rittenhouse was seen wearing a Black Rifle Coffee Company shirt, and they wanted to distance themselves from that individual. Key employees at the company also were donating to Democrats. Hafer doubled down on throwing many in his base under the bus, describing them as racist and a repugnant group of people.
That's Founding Flavors Coffee. If you haven't already, this is a good time for me to remind you to try a cup of Founding Flavors Coffee over at apforlibertyshop.com. At Founding Flavors Coffee, we are certified, woke-free, patriotic, pro-American coffee by your favorite libertarian, Austin Peterson. If you haven't tried it yet, it's absolutely delicious. Today, you're maybe asking, what is Austin drinking? Is he drinking Jeffersonian Java or maybe Franklin's Electric Elixir? Actually, today, I'm trying a new brand that we haven't brought to market just yet. I've got a whole bunch of new different blends and some single origin as well. So I'm taste testing a whole bunch of new coffees this week to see which new ones we're going to add. Which do you think, which American history figure do you think we ought to add to our list of founding flavors? So some people have made suggestions that we need to add Thomas Paine or Nathan Hale or Patrick Henry or Sam Adams as some of our other founding flavors. What do you think? Who do you think we should add over to the lineup? Because this morning I'm drinking a dark roast, which is pretty delicious. And I'm not quite sure if we're going to add it to the lineup yet, but I'm going to be doing that this week. Right now, my favorite is two favorites from our list are Jeffersonian Java, which is a light roast, a lot of caffeine in that, hell of a kick. But my number one favorite, I think, is still Benjamin Franklin's Electric Elixir. So if you haven't tried the AP for Liberty Shop coffee, definitely do that. Again, it's certified woke free at apforlibertyshop.com. Don't drink communist coffee. Stop sending money to corporations that hate you. Probably one of the most important parts of this video that people I think really missed, so I'm going to cut it into its own video, is that it's not just lefty corporations that are going woke. For example, let's put real quick, I'm going to play this for you again. Pay attention to this part about Black Rifle Coffee Company here. Let's take a listen to this right here. Look at this. This is
Kyle Rittenhouse was seen wearing a Black Rifle Coffee Company shirt, and they wanted to distance themselves from that individual.
So Kyle Rittenhouse was seen wearing a Black Rifle Coffee Company shirt, and Black Rifle Coffee Company came out and threw him under the bus. If you're spending your money on Black Rifle Coffee Company, just consider how they feel about Kyle Rittenhouse, and this is how they feel about you.
Key employees at the company also were donating to Democrats.
Oh, you could say, oh, okay, well, Black Rifle Coffee Company, their key employees are donating to Democrats. Okay, well, they're just trying to play both sides, right? They just want to be able to have a good relationship, so they're sending money to Democrats. But here's the thing. They threw you guys under the bus. If you're a Black Rifle Coffee Company employee or a drinker, then here's what they have to say about you. These are their words in the New York Times.
Hafer doubled down on throwing many in his base under the bus, describing them as racist and a repugnant group of people.
Yeah, you are racist and a repugnant group of people. Stop spending money and sending your coffee money to woke corporations that hate you. Try Founding Flavors Coffee, and all of your money gets spent on issues that you care about. We're going to be using it to fund our documentary about the Battle of Athens. So check it out at apforlibertyshop.com. That's apforlibertyshop.com. If they think that so stop sending money to people who think that you're a racist and repugnant group of people. Okay. There you go. All right. So back to Richard Nixon. Okay. So the counter-revolution. This is really good stuff. What are we looking at right here? Hold on. 8:42 a.m. this morning. Okay. It's because I don't have my phone on. I'm trying to kind of keep an eye on the time here, so it's a little challenging. Hopefully my phone's going to arrive by tomorrow, so I should be able to get back on the train here. Okay, here we go. All right. bringing on the counter-revolution. So the French Revolution fell to the forces of Thermidor. The Revolution of 1848 fell to the empire of bourgeoisie. The Bolshevik Revolution fell to the democratic capitalists. Marx himself viewed counter-revolution as an overwhelming threat. He says every important part of the revolutionary annals from 1848 to 1849 bears the heading "Defeat of the Revolution," he lamented, right? Meaning that there was always a danger that with the Marxist revolution, there could be a counter-revolution, which is what Richard Nixon brought today to bear in the 1960s. So what Christopher Rufo is saying here in his piece is that the urgent task for the political right today is to comprehend the dynamics of revolution and counter-revolution, and to create a strategy for dislodging the new left ideology of 1968, which has solidified control over the most fundamental structures of American society. So this challenge has to be met not just in the realm of policy debate, but we have to win this fight on philosophical and political grounds, right? So our counter-revolution today is not one of class, but it takes place along a new axis of the citizen and an ideologically driven state. So the ultimate ambition is not to replace the new universal class, right? The heirs of the 60s cultural revolution, right? But we want to restore the nation's founding principles of citizen rule over state rule, right? So the current moment can be symbolized as a conflict between the revolution of 1968, the leftist revolution, and the revolution of 1776, right? So the 1968ers, they promised liberation through the destruction of old forms of order. They appealed to the romantic spirit of the revolutionary, but their campaigns always collapse into nihilism. They tear away the masks, they denounce great ideals, they humiliate the old heroes, and they leave nothing but an immense void in their place. Right? There's nothingness, meaninglessness. That's what the revolution of 1968 was. But the counter-revolution, our revolution, the revolution of 1776, we have to take our bearings from the common citizen and offer to restore his dignity and mastery over his own life, which I think, again, we're going to get to the song that this whole podcast is named after, the Men North of Richmond, in a moment, because I think it speaks viscerally to the populist stings that I feel, an anti-elitist bias that I feel very much in my heart and in my mind and in my soul, but of which sometimes my intellect counteracts and plays against. That passion must be tempered by reason. And while this song stokes my passions, in considering the lyrics, I wish to temper it with reason, and I will do that in a moment. The movement against the revolution of 1968 had begun to take form in the closing stretch of that year. As radical left-wing fashions asserted themselves in universities and the streets, Richard Nixon promised to restore law and order on behalf of the, quote, silent majority. Now, Nixon is held in contempt these days, even by many conservatives and libertarians, of course, but parts of his legacy deserve reappraisal. He acutely understood the threat of ideological revolution and anticipated the dynamics of bureaucratic capture. In his presidential nomination speech of 1968, Nixon set the stakes for the American public and established themes that still dominate American politics today. He said, "My friends, we live in an age of revolution in America and the world. We see cities enveloped with smoke and flame. We hear sirens in the night. We see Americans dying on distant battlefields abroad. We see Americans hating each other, fighting each other, killing each other at home." Nixon called to the great majority of Americans, the forgotten Americans, the non-shouters, the non-demonstrators. He defended this silent majority against attacks that have since become ubiquitous. Christopher Rufo writes about Richard Nixon, saying that Nixon says, "They're not racists or sick. They're not guilty of the crime that plagues the land. They are black. They are white. They're native-born and foreign-born." He said to the audience in Miami Beach, "And this I say to you tonight, is the real voice of America." Nixon appealed to the revolution of 1776 as an antidote to the revolution of 1968. He said, "To find the answers to our problems, let us turn to a revolution that will never grow old." He said the American Revolution was and is dedicated to progress, but our founders recognized that the first requisite of progress is order. Now, there is no quarrel between progress and order because neither can exist without the other. And to those who say that law and order is the code word for racism, here is a reply. Our goal is justice for every American. Highly recommend that you read this piece. That is from Richard, that is written by Christopher Rufo about Richard Nixon's speech and his counter-revolution of 1968, which was, of course, swept aside by the impeachment and resignation of Richard Nixon. So highly recommend, again, that piece. I did drop it in the stream. You're going to have to go up there. Restore the Revolution of 1776. Great piece. Again, the title of it by Christopher Rufo is Bring on the Counter-Revolution in City Journal magazine. It is a must-read, a requirement of that all libertarians read by force of law, says AP for Liberty. Violate your nap. Okay. What else do we have for her, Johnny, on the show? Ah, yes. The Men North of Richmond. Let's play this song and then consider, but listen very closely to the words that he's saying and ask yourself if this is something that you agree with on a visceral level, but in which there might be, well, perhaps, I don't know, perhaps a different take on it. Let's take a listen to this. Let's listen to Men North of Richmond, which absolutely just took over the internet. Hold on one second here. I have a little bit of problem with the internets. I'm definitely lost without my cell phone today to keep me on track, but here we go. Twitter, weirdness, and transition. Here we go. You wish I could. Oh, that is not the full song, is it? It's only 45 seconds of it. AP, you got to get your stuff together. Will you please? AP, here we go. And there's the song. Baba ching, baba ching, baba ching, baba ching. Alrighty. Sorry about that, guys.
I've been selling my soul, working all day, overtime hours for bullshit pay, so I can sit out here and waste my life away, drag back home and drown my troubles away. It's a damn shame what the world's gotten to for people like me. People like you, wish I could just wake up and it not be true, but it is. Oh, it is, living in the new world with an whole soul. These rich men north of Richmond, Lord knows they all just wanna have total control. Wanna know what you think, wanna know what you do, and they don't think you know. But I know that you do, 'cause your dollar ain't shit, and it's taxed to no end, 'cause the rich men, north the rich men. I wish politicians would look out for minors, and not just minors on an island somewhere. Lord, we got folks in the street, ain't got nothing to eat, and the obese milking welfare. Well, God, if you're 5'3" and you're 300 pounds, taxes ought not to pay for your bags of fudge rounds. Young men are putting themselves 6 feet in the ground, 'cause all this damn country does is keep on kicking them down. Lord, it's a damn shame what the world's gotten to for people like me, people like you. Wish I could just wake up and it not be true, but it is. Oh, it is, living in the new world with an whole soul. These rich men north of Richmond, Lord knows they all just wanna have total control. Wanna know what you think, wanna know what you do, and they don't think you know, but I know that you do, 'cause your dollar ain't shit, and it's taxed to no end, 'cause the rich men, north the rich men.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
I've been selling my soul, working all day, overtime hours for bullshit pay.
Damn. Good stuff. Love it. Beautiful song. And, on a visceral level, I appreciate that. And I think that it makes a lot of good points. And I agree with a lot of it. But then I read this criticism of it yesterday, and it got me thinking. I do want to also very quickly say thank you to the adherent of Lady Columbia. I will address your super chat here in just a moment once I make my point about this song. You do have a really good point there. And thank you for that very generous super chat, adherent of Lady Columbia. That I read a criticism of this song from someone who said this. He says that the main point of conservatives' new favorite song is that, quote, rich men have devalued and taxed the dollar. He says, but in America, most taxes are paid by the rich. Very true. And even our poor are rich by global standards. Again, very true. He says, note that an off-the-grid Virginia farmer can spend more than the annual household income in most countries on recording equipment for his music hobby. Also very true. 40 years ago, an American hillbilly would have been lucky to own his own harmonica that cost less than a one-week supply of this guy's beard wax. Very funny. And then this gentleman, Nathan Coffness, he says, populists on both the left and right can't articulate what irks them. So they invent economic grievances and blame, quote, these rich men north of Richmond for forcing them to, quote, sit out here and waste my life away.
I've been selling my...
Get an interesting criticism of that song. And it's very true, of course. The things about the United States are fundamentally that it is the rich people who pay the majority of the taxes in this country. And of course, 40, 50 years ago, a hillbilly farmer living off the grid in Virginia would have been very lucky to have had the kind of recording equipment that gentleman had to make that song, right? Because the poor in America are far better off than those around the world. And so perhaps we ought to count our blessings. That doesn't mean that the dollar ain't worth shit or that we haven't taxed it into oblivion. I agree with that. And it doesn't mean that there aren't those rich, weird, elite pedophiles that go out on islands, as we've seen in the movie Sound of Freedom, to go and commit cardinal sins of which they deserve the ultimate punishment to a large extent. Jay Walker says, I think the point was that there's no reason these politicians should be rich. Well, if they get their money through, proper channels, then why not? I mean, Rand Paul, Thomas Massie, Mike Lee, Ted Cruz. I mean, these men are all far richer than we are. And they got their money through legitimate means, right? Rand Paul is an eye doctor, for example, and Thomas Massie, a scientist, right? And, Rand Paul and Thomas Massie and Mike Lee and Ted Cruz, no matter how populist they may appear to be, or J.D. Vance or others, these are all members of the elite, right? Remember this, that those politicians who are trying to sell you a populist view of the United States today are all far richer than you and live in castles out in the woods, if they do live out in the woods. And most of them don't live out in the woods. Many of them live in big cities or in Washington, D.C. I'd like to I would like to, Studio 314 says, he's speaking about politicians, APV Liberty, not rich men in general. He says the rich men north of Richmond, so perhaps, right? Sarah Sanchez says, thankful someone else is thinking the same thing about some of the lyrics of that song. Fair perspective, AP. That's right. Jay Walker says he'd probably agree with those exceptions, possibly. And therein lies the rub, right? Where my heart and my soul and my body are with the populists, right? While I would rather spend a Friday evening drinking with the blue collars and hanging out with the regular folks, I'm still the type of person who's going to get up on a Saturday morning and turn on an hour and a half lecture from the Cato Institute on Hayek and monetary policy, right? So there's this duality of man inside of me. And, I was thinking about this over the weekend about like some of my contradictions with libertarians, and I was thinking about the movie Full Metal Jacket. And in the movie Full Metal Jacket, there's this scene where Private Joker is approached by a colonel or a general, what have you, who asks him about the peace sign that he wears on his jacket, and he's got a hat that says "Born to Kill." And so the general, the colonel asks him this question about, soldier, why do you do this? Why are you, wearing that peace sign on your jacket? Aren't you with us, sir? And he's like, yes. He says, your hat says born to kill. Your helmet says born to kill. And you got this peace sign. Is this some kind of a joke, right? Is this some kind of a sick joke or whatever? But Joker explains it as the concept of the duality of man, right? Within every libertarian is an authoritarian creeping to get out. That's what I've noticed about so many libertarians, is that they wish to see their ideology by force. Consider this. The gold standard is statist. The gold standard is authoritarian because it's still government declared, right? The government still fixes the price of gold to a certain standard. It's still a standard, right? To say that the gold standard is some libertarian ideal is to incorrectly understand the decentralized nature of libertarianism. Actually, a much better concept of monetary policy is not a gold standard. It's actually a free banking standard, meaning a no standard for a fixed currency, right? The gold standard itself is actually inherently statist, because it demands that the government set some kind of a fixed standard for itself. It's a conservative standard, not necessarily a libertarian one. And for those of you who are, rearing back when you're hearing this and you're having a sort of an antibiotic response to what I'm saying here, I would like to invite you to consider that the United States had a free banking period, as well as Scotland, in which banks were not required to, banks were allowed to set their own currencies, and of which many people say there was much confusion, in which they called for a Federal Reserve in 1913 at the time. But the Gilded Age, the age of robber barons, as the left calls it, I think is an interesting case study in regards to decentralized currency in the United States. But is it that we wish to have a government standard of currency, or is it that we wish to have no standard of currency? I would say that the no standard is the more libertarian version of that, but I will leave that to you to debate and argue, right? Let us not seek for consistency, for a foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds, little statesmen, philosophers, and divines. With consistency, a great mind has nothing to do. You may as well concern yourself with a shadow on the wall. Speak what you believe in hard words today, though it may contradict everything that you say tomorrow. Oh, you are sure to be misunderstood, bleat the crowds. Is it so bad then to be misunderstood? Every great and wise and pure being on this planet was misunderstood. Galileo, Copernicus, Jesus, Pythagoras. To be great is to be misunderstood. Hope you understand. Thanks so much for watching the Wake Up America show. Again, great to see you all this weekend. Joni Rankin, Camelia Peterson, Stephanie Peterson, Quest Fanning and his family, the lovely Matt Unruh and his wife Robin. It was great to meet everybody. Thanks so much to Doug Ashby and Robbie Thurman. Thanks for the super chats to all of our friends. I do want to address adherent of Lady of Columbia. Send me a direct message actually on Twitter if you don't mind at AP for Liberty, because I'd like to have a conversation with you about that. About Christopher Rufo. Unfortunately, I ran out of time. It's 9 a.m., so I got to run. But I do want to talk to you about that and your point, which is very well made. I just didn't have time to get to it today. I had so much news. I will be back tomorrow, so I hope you will be back as well, adherent of Lady Columbia. I like to make new friends, and people who drop super chats like that, I think I would definitely like to engage with a little bit more to get to know you and why you decided to support the show. We'll see you tomorrow on the Wake Up America show at wakeupAmericaShow.com.
Donald Trump, and I approve this message. Believe me, Austin Peterson is the best. He's got the greatest Wake Up America show I've ever seen. Whenever I tune in the mornings and watch the live stream, let me tell you, he has got the absolute best content. I love his guests. It's just a total blast to watch, and I highly endorse and recommend the Wake Up America show. It's terrific, believe me.
Hello, my name is Kelvin. Welcome to Frenchy Bush. This is my Dee-Dee's website. Now I've decided to speak to you with my real voice for the first time ever to tell you about how cool Frenchy Bush is. But I've decided that this is the perfect opportunity to share with you. Frenchy Bush is a good website. You should follow us on socials. If you like Frenchies or any kind of bulldogs, me and my new brother George are going to try to make your life more fun. Hello, I'm George. My neck isn't really thick yet, but it will be. We are so glad you're here. Please ignore my floating eyeball. It helps me spot predators who might be approaching from the sides. Dee Dee made Frenchy bullshit to review things that he uses on me and my brother to tell you if it's good or bullshit. Take this collar, for example. Dee Dee really likes it. Dee Dee said it's really handy because us Frenchies got thick necks. Need something really tough. People think Frenchies are little, but if you look at us from below, you can see we are really pretty buff. Beefcake. Yes. Look at my creamy thighs and chest. Yes. You like that? Big brother, please focus. Frenchy bullshit. Please follow us for more great content and read the Frenchy bullshit blog for more fun and cool stuff.
I'm a public defender.
I am a public defender.
I'm proud to be a public defender.
80% of Americans accused of a crime will get appointed a public defender.
Everybody from a speeding ticket to capital murder.
For every dollar we spend on public defenders, we spend $3 on prosecutors.
Public defenders have to do pretty much everything on their own.
Social workers, counselors.
Investigating is another piece of it.
The average public defender holds 300 cases annually.
You never feel like there's enough time.
Public defenders have health issues all the time.
A lot of people give up and say, I can't do this work anymore.
Gideon's Promise trains, mentors, and supports public defenders.
There are a lot of people who say that they would not still be public defenders, but for Gideon's Promise.
It's fueled me to continue on in this fight.
Gideon's Promise has changed the face of public defense.
People see us as troublemakers.
Good trouble only.
We don't make it easy. It should not be easy to take away someone's liberty.
Tired of spending your hard-earned money on woke corporations that don't share your pro-freedom values? Fed up with sipping liberal lattes and progressive cappuccinos? Introducing Founding Flavors from AP for Liberty Shop. Get your day started with Washington's Revolutionary Roast. As robust and principled as the man himself, this blend is the shot of energy heard round the world. Or maybe you want to taste the fervor of freedom with Adams's Patriotic Perk. It's as dynamic and balanced as the U.S. Constitution, sure to awaken your spirit of liberty. For the aficionados, we've got the Jeffersonian Java, a complex mix of flavors that speaks volumes about your refined tastes. And don't forget Betsy's Liberty Lullaby, our decaf option, crafted with the same care and dedication Betsy Ross put into our Star-Spangled Banner. This blend lets you enjoy the taste of freedom anytime without losing sleep. No woke beans here, folks. Just pure, patriotic, pro-freedom flavors brewed with love for liberty. So why compromise your principles for a cup of coffee? Stand up for your values, perk up your patriotism, and start your day the American way. Get your Founding Flavors at apforlibertyshop.com.